Well, hi everyone. Good morning. Today is Monday, October 19th, and it's great to greet you today as we start another week together. I hope you had a nice weekend, and thank you for joining us for worship yesterday. If you were able to participate in worship, yesterday we continued our journey through the Bible and rounded out our journey through the Gospels, actually, with an exploration of John's Gospel, and in particular, the I am statements of Jesus. You heard me preach about how these I am statements are a unique hallmark for John's Gospel, and they provide such an important and timely message for us, not just as we're going through the Bible together this year, but certainly during this unsettling season of time. I preached on I am the vine and you are the branches. It's a reminder that we need Jesus and we need each other to bear the fruit of God's love. If you're following along with the daily readings, you know that yesterday's daily reading was another or a different I am statement of Jesus. I am the resurrection and the life. And I thought I would focus on that passage, that phrase, and read the story that was part of our reading yesterday. It's from John's Gospel, John chapter 11, and it has to do with the death of Lazarus and the conversation that Jesus had with Martha afterwards. So I'll read a couple verses from John 11. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill, and so the sister sent a message to Jesus. Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of Man may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Now I'll skip ahead to verse 17. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. This is a story about grief, and grief is a hallmark of this pandemic. I think many of us are still feeling the loss of so many things. In some cases, many of us are grieving the loss of loved ones, the Lazarus people in our lives whom we have said goodbye to over recent months, and we are remembering them with great fondness and grief. I think what Martha says is so raw, so genuine, so real, and so relevant to the human experience. After Jesus finally shows up late, or at least later than what Martha expected, Martha says to Jesus, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. Those 2 words, if only, are 2 of the most haunting and pervasive words in our Christian vocabulary. Those are the moments when we say, God, if only. That's when we're reaching out into the dark, and our grief, as hard as grief is on its own, grief when it's coupled with remorse is even harder. Or grief when it's layered with regret or even anger, that makes it even tougher. And I wonder if there's any part of you today that is not just feeling loss, but feeling regret, second-guessing yourself, or even anger that things weren't better than they were. If only things had been different, maybe we've been able to avoid the loss that we're experiencing in our life. We ask that question on many levels at different times, and it's some of the hardest questions we ask God. And so I was thinking about that concept of if only, and I remembered that a few years ago, I had written about this very story, the raising of Lazarus, in a book that was published not long ago. It's a Lenten study called Embracing the Uncertain, Lenten study for unsteady times. And I talk about this story from John 11 and the raising of Lazarus. If you've read the book, I hope you've enjoyed it. I actually have given away all my copies, and so this copy is Sally's. So Sally, if you're watching, I went into your office and borrowed your copy, so thank you. I'll give it back to you. I appreciate it. But in chapter 4, this is what I write about this story and the way that it connects to our feelings of loss and the way we remember those who have died, and most importantly, how we think about the legacy that we leave behind. If it's okay, I'll just read a couple pages of this for you. When Jesus arrived, Mary and Martha were grieving in the midst of their community. They were angry, perhaps at Jesus, but more at the unfairness of it all. And Jesus was there with them. He heard the perspective first from Martha and then from Mary that if he'd been there, Lazarus wouldn't have died. He saw the tomb and he shared their grief by becoming deeply disturbed and weeping. He spoke a word of hope to Martha, but he also came to just be with them, to share in their grief. Jesus was there to sit, to listen, to gather the stories, and to identify with their struggles. I have to say, of all the privileges that we as pastors observe in our profession, it is precisely moments like these, when Jesus sat with the grieving, that are our most sacred privilege. The time that I spend with a family to plan a funeral is one of the most profound aspects of ministry to me, and I imagine that's true for any pastor. Ministers serve as counselors, resident theologians, and wordsmiths at such times, in which every critical part of a clergy's calling is employed. Most of all, we are there to listen for the stories, the narratives that capture and express a family's fullest remembrance of their loved ones. Getting the story started is fairly easy, but then the storytelling takes a life of its own. The stories come randomly from different members of the family with no predetermined order or flow. Sometimes they will tell of an event from their loved one's early childhood, and then the next one will be from their final days. Sometimes the accounts flow chronologically, as if following a timeline. And then on a dime, the next story will jump ahead or leap back to the past. In one moment, a family member will tell a riot of a tale that sends everyone into stitches, and then in the blink of an eye, the family member will catch a breath and become weepy. It is as if family members want to speak aloud their stories as soon as they think of them, as if sharing them out in the open will preserve them a little longer in their collective memory. I often like to think of telling and hearing these stories as catching fireflies in the night. You just tell the story, you catch it, preserve it, and let its light shine, even for a moment, to brighten the darkness. Something like that is exactly the dynamic at play when the story of Jesus and Mary and Martha takes its surprising turn. The very first thing that Martha expresses to Jesus is understandable grief and anger. Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But in the very same breath, in the same sentence, like a firefly at night, a new insight captures her mind. She says, even now I know that whatever you ask God, God will give you. I know that he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus confirms her words and more. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. In other words, in her grief, Martha is still hoping in the resurrection, and Jesus tells her that resurrection is standing right there in front of her. He is the resurrection and the life, and he is there. You see, we Christian people believe that when we walk on this side of the grave, we do so in the shadow of the eternal. We claim that Though we inhabit finite and mortal days when bodies break down and death prevails, we live with the light of eternity in our hearts. That means the power of the resurrection and the promise of new life are not simply things that await us when we die, but they can also inform our hope and even our behavior in the way we live today. It's right here with us. He is right here with us. Eternity can shape our mortality. The future can inform our present. The promise of God's glory yet to be revealed can actually be experienced today, so that the way we live in the present has consequences for eternity. Despite the variety of stories that are told by family members over the countless funerals that I have been privileged to conduct over the years, I have detected a general theme among them. Loved ones are not generally most remembered for their achievements, or their possessions, or their trophies, their financial portfolios, the number of publications, or the number of zeros in their salary, or the number of abbreviations after their name. The thing they are most remembered for, their relationships. They are remembered for the way other people say their lives are forever changed for the good, because that loved one was a part of it. They are remembered for the enduring lessons of their example, the legacy of their character, and the way that they have made those around them better people because of the love that they gave. It is not about treasures and trophies. It is about love. It's about the love we give and receive and give again in a kind of reciprocal circle modeled for us in Jesus Christ. That is the only thing that lives here on earth long after we are gone. Yes, this is a season of grief and loss, a season of asking the tough questions about how we get through this and where God is. And the way you frame it is right after the language of your own heart. But there is one common thread among all of us. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And that Jesus is here right now. So my prayer for you is that over these days and months that lie ahead, that you will more and more experience resurrection in your life. Not a resurrection that we wait for after we die, but a resurrection here and now, in the shadow of eternity, so that you can experience the presence of Jesus right here in your life every day. I'd like to offer a prayer for you. God, I thank you for being with us in the midst of these unsettling times, and I thank you for the way that your presence and your Spirit guides us and offers us new life and resurrection even right now. Bless us, especially in the midst of any grief, resentment, anger, regret that we feel, and help us to experience your love on this side of eternity. In Jesus' name, amen. Good to be with you. Once again, see you here every morning for our Facebook devotionals, and join us again this Sunday for worship as we begin the book of Acts and begin really turning the home stretch in this year-long journey through the Bible. We get to hear about the church and begin to hear about Paul and the amazing stories that are not just stories from long ago. These are our stories, and we get to read them together. So good to be with you. Hope you have a great week. Remember, you are loved.